In the previous video in this series, we discussed the beginning of our universe. Leading scientists 100 years ago were committed to an eternal, steady-state universe. But now, most scientists and philosophers agree that our universe had a beginning. It might be one of trillions and trillions of universes, but now it seems certain that our universe began to exist rather than existing for eternity. Neither time nor space existed before our universe began 13.8 billion years ago. If time began with the beginning of our universe, that means history began then as well. So we turn now to what we know of the history of our universe. History started with all included in our universe emerging from an infinitesimally small point and exploding in an inferno of heat beyond all imagining. Some say there was a massive expansion where the newborn universe shot out of its tiny shell at thousands of times the speed of light, inflating the universe into something gigantic in less than a mere trillionth of a second. Yes, far, far faster than the speed of light, in trillionths of a second. None of our laws of physics can explain the singularity, that tiniest of all points, the start of its expansion, or the massive inflation that created a huge universe in a period of time so brief that it almost cannot be measured. Prior to this point in our universe, the laws of physics simply didn't apply. All those fixed laws that we count on as reliable and necessary to keep our universe going were nowhere to be found because they didn't exist. What was happening at the very beginning cannot be described by any known laws. But after that huge initial expansion, the explosion began to slow, and the incredibly hot infant universe began to cool. When it did, the particles of matter that make up our universe began to be formed, and the laws of nature that we depend on came into play, determining how those emerging particles behaved and interacted with each other. With the emergence of those laws, something very magical, mysterious, and quite possibly miraculous happened. Something so stupendously unlikely that it caused some scientists and philosophers to reconsider their ideas about creation and even about God. Many others, however, developed deeply non-intuitive and some would say nonsensical ideas to explain how something like this would be possible. To understand just how strange and unlikely this feature of the brand new universe is, we must go forward in time, all the way from 13.8 billion years ago to now, to us, today, sitting here thinking about the beginning of the universe and contemplating just how we got here. We are alive. We are living beings. That means we eat and digest, we transform energy from the atoms in our food into the beating heart of every particle, every atom, every cell. We reproduce, creating near copies of ourselves who are also alive, who breathe, metabolize, and reproduce. Life itself is one of the greatest mysteries of all. No one can yet explain how the bits and pieces that emerged from the massive initial explosion and then from exploding stars could possibly form themselves into something that is alive, into beings that can move, find food, transform food into needed energy, and keep their kind going from generation to generation. But not only are we alive, we have minds. We can think, we can study, we can observe the universe and deduce laws and ideas that explain why things happen the way they do. And we can be aware that we ourselves are thinking these things. We can not only think, but we can feel. We can experience our lives and think about ourselves experiencing thinking. We are conscious beings with remarkable abilities to arrive at truth. As far as we know today, in the entire vast universe stretching out some 40 billion light years away, we are the only such beings that exist. There may be others, but our search so far has come up empty. The question here is, how did all this come about? What made it possible for life to be formed, exist, and develop on this tiny speck of a blue planet among 100 billion stars in our galaxy, which itself is one of 100 billion or more such galaxies? We know this much. It took a very, very precise alignment of the forces at work in the universe to make that happen. Those forces took their form in the very instant that all things broke free from that infinitesimal point called the singularity. The precision of these forces is what is so astounding. But they needed to be that precise because if any one of dozens of very precise quantities were off by the slightest little bit, life itself could not exist, and you would not be here watching this brief video. There is nothing in the laws themselves that say they have to be set just right for us to be here. They could be different, and still have a universe with many of the features we know in this one. In fact, those who think there are zillions of universes think that each one might have different laws, from very different to slightly different. Those universes may be similar, but with one big difference: no life could exist in them. Scientists and philosophers agree that life and consciousness are possible because our universe was fine-tuned for life. Here's what famous scientist Stephen Hawking said: "The laws of science, as we know them at present, contain many fundamental numbers like the size of the electric charge of the electron and the ratio of the masses of the proton and the electron. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life." Finely adjusted, or the term fine-tuning, hardly does it justice. Let's look at just one of many examples. The ratio of the electromagnetic force to the gravitational force between a pair of protons is approximately 10 to the 36th power. That is 10 with 36 zeros behind it. If there were one zero taken away, our universe wouldn't allow for life. Now that is precision. That is very fine-tuning indeed. Again, this is one of many such very precise numbers. In the tiniest fraction of a second after the Big Bang, it is like there were a whole series of dials that had to be turned to just the right number, each dial to exactly the right number. If the dials were like roulette wheels, each spin had to land on the exact number. To make it more difficult, the combinations between them had to be just so. So if wheel number 126 didn't land on 3, well, wheel number 597 didn't land on 7, and wheel 18 didn't land on 1, then the whole thing would have come undone. The precision of numbers of a wide range of forces, plus the combination, is what makes fine-tuning so incredibly fine. This discovery of fine-tuning has caused scientists to contemplate all kinds of answers. Many prominent scientists are avowed atheists and strongly opposed to any religious belief, especially if it threatens to intrude on science. But many of them, in confronting the fact of fine-tuning, have called it almost a miracle, or suggested some superintelligence, not God, is behind it. Or as famed scientist Freeman Dyson said, it is like the universe knew we were coming. In this series of videos, we are asking the question, when it comes to the universe and what we know about it, is it more reasonable to conclude that reality is top-down or bottom-up? Top-down says the universe and we in it are here because we are intended to be here. Bottom-up says it is all an inexplicable accident with only natural causes allowed to be considered. If one accepts the top-down idea, the fine-tuning represents no problem at all. Of course our universe would be designed specifically for life. That is obviously what was intended. What is amazing about it is that we can discover and begin to understand exactly how that intention was worked out in our universe. Science in this view isn't about seeking to replace the idea of creation or God, but rather to understand the mechanisms of intention. The bottom-up understanding says, no, we cannot consider design or intention or any idea of creation. There has to be a completely natural, not supernatural, explanation. Many bottom-up thinkers believe they have found one. It's called the multiverse. It's the idea that there are zillions and zillions of other universes, maybe an uncountable or infinite number. It is no mystery that we are living in the one that is suitable for life. If our universe was not suitable, we would not be here. The fact of fine-tuning for life leaves all of us with a clear top-down or bottom-up choice, design or chance. If it is design, it leads to the question of the designer and the intentions behind it, as well as trying to understand how the mechanisms of intention work. If it is by chance, given the stupendous number of combinations of coincidences, there have to be an unlimited number of chances, and that means an unlimited number of universes. Can anyone prove the God hypothesis? No. God's existence cannot be affirmed using science or logic alone. But what about the zillions of other universes as suggested by those who reject intention? Equally unprovable. They of necessity are beyond our reach and will forever remain that way. It turns out that faith is necessary for taking either the top-down or bottom-up view. We all need faith. The question is, what or who do we put our faith in?